Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another arcade game video for you this evening. This is a repair video that we're going to do because our Asteroids started tripping and we thought that might be a good one to film. People might be interested in that because it's so interesting. So check out what's going on with it. The damn screen is upside down. Let me turn off the lights so you can see it a little easier. The screen is upside down. Now, it's not because we installed the monitor upside down or anything like that. It was working fine a little while ago. And then we came back here and it was upside down. Now, it's not just reversed that way, it's also reversed the other way. It's perfectly upside down, right? So, we're trying to figure out what in the world's going on with it. And I've been thinking about it a little bit. Now, why would these, now another thing too, sometimes earlier it was tripping a little bit too. The graphics would screw up and stuff, but it would never reset. And we went into the test menu, and in the test menu, the test screen is upside down, and it doesn't give us any RAM errors or anything like that. So that's a little bit of information. And then second, we started thinking, why would it be upside down? Now, if you're into this kind of stuff, you may know that it would display upside down if it's in a cocktail game. So in a cocktail game, the first player plays one way and then the screen reverses for the second player. See, it's starting to trip a little bit. Look at that. Crazy! So I'm trying to tell by looking at it when it trips if I can get any more information. But basically we're trying to figure it out logically just by looking at it. So it's upside down, which it would display that way on a two-player game in a cocktail. So we looked into that. The way that it displays, the way that it knows that it's in a cocktail game is there's an extra wire on the harness. Well, that wire is not on this harness, but there's a little circuit that makes the screen go upside down for the second player and stay right side up for the first player. So our theory is that something has screwed up in that circuit, and there's a voltage that does it. You can see whenever it trips, watch when it comes back. Okay, see how the Asteroids are still the same size? That's because it's not resetting. It's just tripping. It's still running, it's screwing up the display. Now, another thing too, it can't really be the monitor. The monitor would never screw up like that where it displays everything upside down. So it's got to be something on the game board. There's a 8.2 volt circuit and a negative 8.2 volt circuit that is in that. I'm trying to tell if it's, I think the reason it's tripping is because the monitor is getting a signal that's starting to go backwards, you know, up, like right side up, because it all has to reverse. So like it can't just, let me turn the lights back on. So my theory is it can't just, like that just can't go to the top. It actually has to reverse too. So it has to go, it has to flip that way and flip that way. It's perfectly upside down right now. So I think what's happening is that 0 is trying to go up here, right? And that is trying to go up here, and that spaceship is trying to go over here. So it's, I think it's all trying to flip backwards. So I don't think the board is actually, I'm just watching it while it does it. I don't think the board is actually, I don't think it's a major problem. It looks like a major problem, but I think the only problem is that it's flipped upside down and it's trying to flip back to the right way, and it's caught in between that. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the schematics. So we'll be back and we'll see if we can figure out what in the world's going on. All right, so I pulled up the schematics online, and there is a video inverter section. And basically the way it works is if it's in a cocktail, whenever it switches over to the second player's controls, it grounds this pin, which it has an extra wire in the harness, which blah 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 works with these two transistors. So these two transistors are suspect. It could be either one of those. And then also there's an 8.2 volt and a negative 8.2 volts that make the transistors work. That's what actually does the flipping. So if there's a problem with one of those voltages, I'm thinking maybe that would do it too. Or if there's a problem with either one of these transistors, I'm thinking that would do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the power supply to see if both of those voltages are there. All right, so in this area of the schematics, it shows how that voltage is made. So 36 volts comes in here, and it makes the 22 volts. And then the 12 volt and the 5 volt all come out of that. All that stuff's working right. The problem we may be having, I need to test it, the problem we might be having is with this 8.2 volt here and this negative 8.2 volt here. So I'm going to check both of those voltages to see if they're there. And then, you know, we might end up in a situation where one of them's missing, and then we try to track down why that is or something like that. So I'll go check that out, and we'll see what's up. All right, folks, so we are back. I've checked the voltages. The 8.2 was there, and the negative 8.2 was there. So now I'm on to the next part, and I'm going to show you on the PCB here in a second. This is the circuit that flips everything upside down. So it says, the video inverter circuitry is only used in a cocktail game. And then now remember, this is written when everything's new. They're not assuming that any of this stuff is worn out. In an upright game, which is what we have, pin 19 is unconnected and therefore floats. So they're talking about this pin right here. That's the pin on the harness that connects to the PCB board. So that's not connected to anything, and they say that it floats. So it means since there's no wire connecting to it, it doesn't connect to ground, and it doesn't connect to 5. So if you look, there is a resistor here that ties it to this resistor, which is tied to the 8.2 volts, right? So right here will be a little less than 8.2 volts because it's running through that resistor. And then the voltage will run this way through this resistor. And so over here you'll have a little less than 8.2 volts as well, right? So that's what we should have. When pin 19 floats, transistor Q16 is turned off and transistor Q17 is turned on. So Q16, they're saying, is turned off, right? So you're getting a high voltage here, right? Which means that this 8.2 volts on this transistor isn't connected to over here. It's not turned on. So the 8.2, since this signal here controls it, so when this signal is high, it does not pass that through to this side. So this output here should be, I hope I've got this right. It's connected with this resistor here to a negative voltage. So this should be negative, right? We'll see if I'm right. We're winging it here, people. Transistor Q16 is turned off and transistor Q17 is turned on. Therefore, inverted INV is 8.2 volt DC. Like I said, so that INV there is connected to this resistor to the negative 8.2 volts. So I should get right here on this side of this transistor a negative voltage because it's tied through this transistor to this negative 8.2, right? Therefore, INV is negative 8.2 volt and non-INV is about 8.2 volt. So, because remember they said transistor Q17 is turned on. So Q17's on, so it should be connecting, since this is turned on, it should be connecting its 8.2 volts to this output here, the non-inverted. So the non-inverted should be about 8.2 volts. The result is a non-inverted x-axis and y-axis output. So that's what we want, right? In a cocktail game, the wiring harness shorts connector J20's output pin 7, input pin 19, right? So in a cocktail, they've got this pin 19 connected to pin 7. When the video of player 1 is being displayed, pins 7 and 19 are plus 5 volt DC. This results in a non-inverted video output. Right now we've got something similar because since that's floating, it's always connected to that 8.2 through these two resistors, right? Okay, the result is a non-inverted video output. When the video for player 2 is being displayed, pins 7 and 19 are grounded. So the board, since pin 7 is an output and it's daisy chained over to the 19 in the cocktail, it grounds that. This causes transistor Q16 to be turned on and Q17 to be turned off. So what it does is it makes 19 a ground, and so it grounds that input on Q16, which turns it on. So it connects the 8.2 through to the output, right? Which overrides, since it's got this resistor here, I guess that's how that works. It overrides that, and it makes this INV signal 8.2. It sends it through the transistor. That's how transistors work, right? When the video for player 2 is being displayed, pin 7 and 19 are grounded. This causes transistor Q16 to be turned on and Q17 to be turned off. Therefore, INV is 8.2 and non-INV is negative 8.2. So it turns this one on, which sends the 8.2 through, and the INV connects there. And then on this side of the resistor, you've now got a high voltage instead of a low voltage. And you've got this pull-up resistor here to help it, which turns on this transistor, right? Which, have I got this right again? It turns it off, I'm sorry. Since it's high, it turns the transistor off, which doesn't allow it to pass the 8.2 through. And so on this side, the non-inverted, you've got negative 8.2 because it's tied to that. It's tied to the non-inverted with that pull-down resistor, I guess they would call it. The result is an inverted x-axis and y-axis output, causing the monitor's display to be upside down. All right, so what we need to do is we need to carefully walk through and check all of these voltages. So I'm going to write some of them down and then we're going to go see. But what we're looking for it not to be inverted, what we should have, since we've got an upright, is this pin should be high because it's not tied to anything except this 8.2. So this should be going high, right? Which means that this 8.2, the transistor is not turned on, so the 8.2 won't push over to here. And we should have negative 8.2 on this side of this R142, and then it should also be on this side, maybe a little bit lower, because this transistor shouldn't be turned on, so that 8.2 shouldn't be going through. So our INV should be negative 8. So we're going to go check that. I'll show you how we do that, and we'll see where we're at. All right, folks. So I wrote down a few of those test points. So I'm going to check R146 to see if we're at about 5 volts, right? So R146, we're going to find on the board, they're actually all labeled, so that works out pretty good. And so, sorry, it's not easier to see. If I can find it like I just found it, there is R146. So I'm going to use my multimeter here and check to see what our voltage is like on each one. So we're at 7.43 on one side, and then on the other side we are at 7.45. So I just kind of guessed it was 5, but so we're at 7.4. Okay, and R141 I'm thinking should be 8.2 volts. Okay, here is R141. By the way, the game is turned on. We're at 7 volts. And on the other side of it, we are at 8 volts. So I think we're about right there. Q16, we should have an output of negative, we should have about 8 on one pin, about 8 on another, and about negative 8 on another, right? Q16. So that's right there. So that pin, well, if I can get it on there good enough, is giving us 5.6. The other pin, we're at 7.5, and the last pin, we are at 8.16. So all of our inputs, so our input is over 5 volts, we've got our 8.2, but the output isn't negative 8.2, it's at 8.2. So I'm thinking that that transistor might be bad. Did I write down anything else? Okay, I've also got R142 here, which should be the negative 8.2. Let's see about that. R142, where are you? There we go. And it is negative 8.2. And then on this side of it, it is, if I can get it to connect, Look, and on that side it's 5.7, so it's being, that transistor is turned on. So my theory is Q16 screwed up. It could be something else, but let's try swapping that. All right, folks, so here is Q16 that I pulled out. It is a 2N3906. Now, for those of you that don't do much work on this stuff, I don't know if that will even show. I'm holding it backwards. You might not be able to read it. That is a 2N3906. Now, for those of you who don't do much work on this stuff, the cost of this part is about 2 cents. That's like 2 pennies. Come on, folks. You didn't really think I was lying, did you? I mean, come on. Come on. So, whenever we work on this stuff, we keep, there's a bunch of different ones that are really common, but that's one of the most common it's probably one of the most 4 common little transistors, and they're all really cheap. So, we keep in tons of that stuff because we're always working on stuff. So, I went ahead and swapped it. You can see my new one right there. It's just 3 little pins, a little bit of solder on it, and put it back in, and what do you know? Check that out. So I'm pretty proud of that. Whenever you're working on one, now I gotta watch it, it might start tripping out since I'm talking good about it. But whenever you're working on one and you look in the schematics, make an educated guess of what you think the problem is, and then the very first thing you think it is, it ends up being, and it fixes it. There's nothing more satisfying than that. That's like, you know, being John Wayne and shooting them with one shot, right? So we fixed it. I'll turn the lights out so it looks a little better. That was kind of an easy one, but you know, I've never had one do that before, so I didn't know that it would fix it. But oh, and also for the people that are into this kind of stuff, whenever I took the transistor out and tested it, the old one tested fine. So I don't know. You know how you do the little transistor diode check with, you know, 0.6 one way and above that the other way? All of that was cool. So it wasn't shorted together. I figured if that was the problem, that it would be shorted pin to pin, but it was not. But it was still obviously screwed up. So there must have been something where, you know, the transistor turns on whenever the voltage gets low, apparently. Whenever the voltage falls down to a low state, which I guess is different for everything. But on that one, you saw the input was up over 5, and it still was turning on. So that's the problem. Okay, so there you go. Now, if you enjoy repair videos like this, just subscribe to us here. We don't do too many of them, but as stuff breaks, we film videos, and you know, we're always fixing stuff. And if it's one like this that I think will be pretty cool to film, or you know, pretty easy to film, where I've got a pretty good chance of fixing it. I don't mind filming it. So if you like videos like this, make sure to subscribe to us. Make sure you give us a thumbs up too. That really helps us out. It lets other people know about our videos. And leave your comments below. We will see you on the next video. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me start it so you get to hear that great sound. Oh, damn. It's on quarter play. Well, hell. Let me see here. I can't end the video and you not see the thing actually working, right? That wouldn't be good. All right, there you are. Love that thump sound. Is he gonna get me? Man, that UFO can't shoot nothing. I always wondered if you got the points when the UFO is destroyed, if it's not destroyed by your shot. And now I know. No, you do not. So there you go, folks. Make sure and subscribe to us. Give us a thumbs up. Leave your comments below. We'll see you on the next video.